Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Detections, Season 3. Can you believe it?
No.
3 seasons, almost 1 year.
Almost 1 year. That's the thing that blows my mind, is almost 1 year.
Right? But tonight is special, and the reason why we're starting Season 3 is because with us tonight, you have your hosts, Understudy 77.
And Exile the Tradies.
And let's get ready for the ow, yip, yip.
Ow! Yip, yip! The BSDBandit.
I just got to say, man, like, I'm super duper happy that you joined us and you're going to be a permanent fixture. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I think it's just going to be so much fun.
Oh, yeah. I'm super excited. I'm super amped to be a part of the Texas family, guys. Let's rock out.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, he's a convert.
He is. Yeah. We stole him.
Exactly.
From the other side to come do this with us, which is great.
Listen, I want to put this out here. I love blue team, but red team, I love y'all too. Don't kill me now.
No. You can't say that here. That's not allowed.
We're gonna bleep that out, in post-production.
You know I gotta have some fun with it.
Oh,
you gotta
of course. So let's talk for a minute about the format before we dive into it, right?
Let's rock out.
And then we'll let Charles talk about himself a little bit, and then we'll dive right in. So we're making some changes with the format because of this. Basically, we want to tighten everything up. We want to make it more valuable. We would have taken in community feedback, but we didn't get any. If people want to give us feedback as we switch formats and play with new stuff, like, we are more than happy to hear both good and bad feedback because it helps us get better. It helps us figure out what all of you like.
And if you have the information, please be specific about it too. While we do enjoy hearing you're doing great, it's having a good time, like, specifics on either side helps us understand what specifically is working or what you might like to see change.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to dial back a little bit on the news. So each of us has brought one thing that we want to talk about, but we're going to talk much more in-depthly about that one thing. We're then going to kick into a topic just like we do on non-guest episodes and go through that concept, talk about the topic for a little while. Then Charles here, our resident red teamer / convert from the other side, is actually going to walk through an attack strategy and attack structure. Tell us how he would attack something. And then we are going to talk about how to detect it. Pretty much all of us together, like always, since Charles is a blue teamer too. But having that perspective, and we think really laying out the attack and then moving into the detect is going to bring a lot of value to people. And we really hope that it does, right? Because we think it's going to give you the context. And that's something that a lot of people on the defensive side miss, is that context. So very, very excited to move forward. I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let Charles talk about himself for a little bit. What made him decide to join, what his background is. He has a whole episode of interview you can go listen to for more depth, but take it away, Charles.
All right. Well, again, what got me interested in pretty much going over to blue team is just more from a security standpoint. I wanted to know more about, I wanted to peek behind the curtain per se. Dun-dun. So what
you found a lot of skeletons when you peeked behind that curtain, didn't you?
I sure did. I found out. I actually found out a lot more about myself as well too. Like, just from a thinking perspective, how far the brain can stretch. Because when you only see one piece of the puzzle, then you're only thinking in one dimension. When you pull back that curtain, that's when I started thinking in many different dimensions, but being able to pull it all together. So I have a background, again, in red teaming and penetration testing, and I came over to blue teaming as far as like threat hunting is concerned. So I've been doing threat hunting for a year, but before that, again, red teaming, penetration testing, and before that, I was just a Unix geek and engineer, hence the name BSDBandit.
So first off, talking about all this, like all these different dimensions, like we've really broken the fourth wall, I feel like.
Yeah.
But the other thing worth talking about on dimensions is Exile finally watched Doctor Who.
Yes. Now, I will say, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was partially as a present for you.
It was, and I much appreciate that. But the important thing is that you thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Dude, I knew I was gonna love David Tennant, like just because him as an actor, I just love hands down. But then the Van Gogh episode, what was it called?
Yeah, the Matt Smith episode with Van Gogh.
Yeah,
yes,
I did get borderline ugly crying at the end of that episode. I will admit, like.
See, like we got it. I got you. Like I knew it. It was gonna be. So we watched the Van Gogh episode with Matt Smith, and we watched the Silence in the Library series with David Tennant. The first meeting of River Song for anybody who's watching at home.
Wow,
really good picks to kind of start into that system, and I knew I was gonna get it. I knew it.
So it's okay. Don't feel bad. Because I kind of do a little ugly, sad cry when I watch the end of Care Bears 2 movie. When they say hello, friend. It just does something to you.
I need to watch this movie with you because I've never seen you make a sad face.
It'll make you emotional because it's like, hello, friend. We're going to leave the song alone. I'm not a singer, but
I'll be honest, man. Boy Meets World is what gets to me. Like, that's the thing that gets me. Almost every time it's Boy Meets World.
And for me, the thing that gets me every single time is the reunion scene at the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender when Zuko finally catches back up with Iroh.
So much.
It's like tears. Just
so
tears.
much.
Or if I'm a huge, like, even with Family Ties, when Michael J. Fox moves to New York and he's not coming back to the family.
Right? So I do just want to point out for a second that we have 3 fairly burly masculine dudes here talking about the TV shows that make us cry, showing that masculinity does not have to be toxic and feelings are okay.
Yes, they are.
Just important to point that out, like all about the feels up in here. With that, though, we should probably move to the news. And Charles, as our newest person, I believe you have our first article.
We call this the trial by fire.
Pretty much. Yes. Tell us about it. What do you got? What'd you bring?
Well, Magecart pretty much set me on fire this week. So pretty much with Magecart, it's a lot of bad guys. I hate using the word cyber, by the way. So when I say bad
I prefer
guys, I mean
adversaries. Because they could be girls, too.
Yes. So bad people. I'll put it that way. So there's some bad people out there that are using private Telegram channels to steal credit card information from customers and then making the purchase at the victim sites, which is very interesting, using like Magecart. And then again, this can also be used for, say, like maybe Instacart or other third-party websites as well too. So this is what kind of like grabbed my attention because, again, remember that dimensional thinking that I like to do when it comes to scenarios like this. So now this situation was just used with Telegram in general, but for anyone out there that's actually, using these specific sites, just be careful what you're getting into out there.
And Magecart isn't particularly new. Like, it's been around since like 2016. And they hit a bunch of stuff. I mean, they hit British Airways, they hit Newegg, they hit Ticketmaster in the UK. What's novel or interesting, I think, about this that's new, right, is the Exfil channel.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it new because I just had this thought. I'm like, so before I get into that, I just want to jump back a little bit and say, Charles, if anyone's not familiar with Telegram, quickly, what is Telegram?
Good.
Well, Telegram is actually just a chat program. It's no different than WhatsApp. It's very similar, but a lot of folks use it for like secure communications. So if you want to chat in like encrypted mode, you can with like Telegram. It's kind of similar to Signal. And again, so
because it does end-to-end encryption between the people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for those of you not familiar with Signal, it's similar. It's no different than WhatsApp.
It's basically an isolated chat application for encrypted messaging.
Okay,
exactly.
So
that's what's novel, though.
So what I want to say is about not being new, though, is I just had this thought. I'm like, it's basically old school IRC bots just using a modern chat application to do what they were doing back in the early 2000s over IRC.
Oh, my goodness.
You're not wrong with that, actually.
Exactly.
Not at all. It's I should say when I talk about it being new, it's new for Magecart.
Yes,
right?
new for Magecart.
And it presents very unique challenges for any current structure because, when you talk about exfil over DNS or HTTP or even HTTPS, those are things that you can see.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
When you talk about exfil off of an encrypted, isolated application, that's a little bit more complicated. And this script basically just pulls all the data and sends a fucking Telegram message to somebody.
Yep.
What I didn't find is whether or not it can install Telegram if it's not installed. But I don't think it matters because it does it through API.
Right.
So it basically hits Telegram's API and goes.
Yeah, as long as it's able to send the message to the API, it should be good to go.
So you might be able to see something based on Telegram API calls on the network side because it's not actually going directly through the application, right?
Right. Just like everything else these days, it's the world of APIs.
Oh God, yeah.
But it's all. But going back to the IRC bots, right? It's all just a different way to do an old thing in a new way.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of
absolutely.
Kind of like the DuckTales remake.
We watched that too.
I was going to make a comment about that, but you moved on to the news too quick. And I was going to say that the episode we watched of DuckTales was fantastic. I still quote Launchpad McQuack's comment about remaking movies cannot go wrong.
Right? Is great. But you're not wrong. It's interesting though. And it's something to be knowledgeable of that you're starting to see, and you're probably going to continue to see these new and fascinating new-ish, and I'm air quoting, but nobody can see it.
Yeah.
And fascinating kind of exfiltration methodologies that take advantage of other services that look normal, which again, not uncommon. Just now we have a lot more services that look normal.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Yes.
So that brings us to Exile. What do you have for us this week? So
I had an interesting little article that I came across, partly because, I've been going out and photographing and doing some stuff with the protests here in Portland because it's a pretty big event. So I saw that the Trump administration has a draft proposal that is expanding the depth, the quality, and who has to provide biometric information regarding immigration applications. So that it's not just the people that are attempting to immigrate into the States, but it's any sponsors. And it's no longer just fingerprints, but eye scans, DNA, and facial recognition.
That has a lot of very specific concerns associated with it. I apologize for the delay. I was looking for the unmute button.
Yeah.
I'm trying a new screen layout as well. It's all new here at Detections. So that also has a lot of really interesting concepts associated with it, right? Because the privacy concerns are just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and frightening.
I was going to say, we can start with the fact that now biometric data gets stored federally in a federal database as just the starting point for that, right?
And as we all know, if it's a .gov domain, it's secure.
Where did I hear that recently? People can't see, but I'm stroking my beard.
I have someone very close to me who has started an education in information security. And in their first day of class with 17-year-olds, right? 17, 18-year-olds, they were talking about security a little bit. And somebody said, when there's a .gov, that means it's more secure. And the teacher ended the class. So could not pass up that joke. Yeah. There's a little bit of context for you. So not only the hacking risk, right? And when you talk threat groups that might hit something like this, you're talking radicals, right? This is very interesting data to anybody who's radical.
Or other nation states, right? We've already seen OPM get breached how many times? And this is probably going to be the same organization that'll be responsible for holding the biometric data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it probably won't be OPM because that's Office of Personnel Management. It'll probably be Border, but Border's probably worse. There's just been less reasons to go after Border because they haven't had as much sensitive data, really. But now we've got biometrics. So, Charles, thoughts on this?
Again, Just get ready for the world to burn just a little bit more.
He is holding up a dumpster fire from
Yes.
100 Soft, so
mine are on the way.
Yep.
Yes.
So
when you hear of things being like I said, when you hear of the same companies keep getting breached, and then at the same token, they're being given more responsibilities.
Right? But this is the kind of stuff that changes identity to a whole new level.
Absolutely.
Right? So like identity has always been a privacy concern, and identity has always been of interest to an attacker. It started with credentials, and like that was identity. Well, I mean, it started with like social security numbers, stuff like that. Then you get like credentials and stuff as identity. And identity is important. It's why we have companies billion-dollar companies that do identity and access management. But now you're starting to move into identity of DNA and voice prints and eye scans and all these different things. And you're starting to move into deepfakes, and you're starting to move into all this new technology that can take advantage of video and DNA and very specific pieces of identity that have not yet been compromisable. And now we're talking about making a database of said identity of basically any minorities.
Yep. Now, on the Intel side, I can understand, even aside from my personal opinions about it, is as foreign governments have been able to infiltrate more, deeper, and into corporate areas in order for like corporate espionage, government intelligence and espionage and stuff like that, that there's like a governmental reason behind it, like being able to track people who come in, lie on their immigration forms, end up in some high researcher place in like aerospace or something like that. So there is somewhat of a reason there, but the potential abuse, not just from like outside criminal or nation state style activity, but also internal governmental abuse, like that's the balance we get to face with this as individual citizens.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Agree
on
that one.
We cover the past, we cover the present. Shall we cover the future a little bit?
What does the Ghost of Christmas Future have for us today?
So I think people would be surprised if we didn't talk about this one, but did everybody see Elon Musk's latest unveiling? It's going to. This is probably not the right word choice. And this is from his press conference. It's going to blow your minds. Probably not the best word choice.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some cyberpunk games where they have like literal cranial bomb implants. So. I
mean, wasn't that the entire basically plot of the first Kingsman 2?
Just a little bit.
So like, basically, what it is it's I'm going to sum up what Elon Musk said here. It's a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires. It's a coin-sized chip that you put in your brain. They've been testing it on pigs. The pig has had the chip for a little while. It's called like the Neuralink architecture. Basically takes the pig's brain activity, scans it, does a bunch of stuff. The eventual plan is not only to read, but to be able to like control your devices with your mind.
Why is it and Fitbit for the brain? And this analogy just popped in my head. I feel like I'm watching Baxter Stockman from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles put a chip in the Mauser's head and then have everybody running around like Mausers.
Right?
Crunching through walls.
It's some properly sci-fi shit.
Yes.
And prior to my career, I probably would have been like, oh my God, I love technology. This is amazing. But I have investigated hundreds of breaches at this point in my career. And thousands of claims of unhackable technology, so on and so forth. Especially because if you can control your phone, it means that your phone can probably talk back to the thing. So like the security implications of this piece of technology are incredible. Like, are we going to be at a point in 5 years where a human brain can be hacked? But like not in like the cool way, but like hijacked by an attacker. Like, I'm just going to download your thoughts and then I'm going to blackmail the shit out of you.
You know what's crazy? Relationships are going to be really dangerous.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, how do you really feel about me? And blink twice.
No.
And they start extracting the information. No.
So the other thought I had is, what about this in combination with the growing trend of sex robots? And there's already the concern about sex robots having damaging on relationships because fulfilling physical needs. And now you can have direct interaction with something that's not even human to at least simulate legitimate emotional connection.
I didn't even think about that. I was literally thinking about the hacking complications of this thing. Like, what happens when somebody hacks your brain chip and can download your thoughts?
Right, but they've already hacked human nature with the sex robots.
You're not wrong.
You know, so human nature's already been hacked, so why not the brain?
Yeah.
Also, I wonder what safeguards they're going to have that will kind of keep somebody from like feedbacking into the chip and overloading it, and if that's going to fuck up a person or could fuck up a person.
I think that's more likely to happen than the downloading of thoughts and the sharing of thoughts and a Black Mirror episode style. But
I'm going a little sci-fi there, but like we're going to get there one day.
Yeah. I mean, if it ended up in Black Mirror, it's probably going to happen at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it already happened. It can already happen with pacemakers and shit. Like all these electronic devices that control people's bodies. Like that shit already happens.
Oh my God! And I just thought about something too. Could you imagine what the corporate America landscape is going to look like? Jim has one of the knows his boss has the Fitbit brain, and now he's attempting to attack the API within the Fitbit brain to find out when he's going to get let go, or if there's company secrets that he needs to know about before he actually makes a move. And the same reversal for employers. Okay, who's disgruntled? Who's unhappy? Yeah. Will these be insider threats?
If insider threat analytics isn't bad enough.
If you can man in the middle of that shit, you can literally control Jim's devices, right? Yep. So I can man in the middle of it, and now I have control of Jim's phone and all that data. So maybe I can't hack his brainwaves, but I can get to his data because I just man in the middle of this chip. So my fear is when it becomes like in corporate America or even in the insurance game, where this shit becomes like mandatory. Like, must have this, must submit to DNA testing, blah, blah, blah. If you want to work here, you must have the GE chip in your brain.
Yeah. My last comment on
your productivity.
My last comment on that before we move into the topic is, if anyone's curious about what it is to become a Luddite in light of all of this information we're coming out with, we can provide a link available on the blog after the episode.
Yes, we can.
It just one and a new attack, a new name for an attack could be born, and it's going to be called the FBBOF, Fitbit Buffer Overflow. There you go.
Fitbit Brain Buffer Overflow.
There you go. Fitbit Brain Buffer Overflow. Look at that. New attacks born every day, y'all.
So, we talked a little bit about the past, the present, and the future in our news, which we totally did not plan. Right. But we thought a cool way to start season 3 would be to talk about the past, the present, and the future of the industry. And I mean, we'll kind of just talk a little bit about the past, a little bit about today, and then probably a lot on where we think things are going, because that's particularly interesting. So we'll start with the past, and I'll kind of tee it up for everybody. So, you know, in past, like network security, and this all stems from a tweet that I read where people were like, it was so much harder back then, or it was so, I can't remember, like, I believe it was one of those, like, it was so much harder back then, but we just did the right thing because we had to.
It was about the past. We were more secure.
Yeah, that's what it was. And honestly, like, I kind of agree to a certain extent. Like, we didn't have the visibility of the security tools that we had back then, but like in the past, you had physical networks, you had VPNs, you had perimeters. Like, one defining structure of corporate networks in the past were perimeters. That was something that existed. Lock down the perimeter, solve a good majority of your problems. I leave it there for other people to talk about the past.
Go, Charles.
Well, you're not wrong there. I mean, it was all about the perimeter. It's no different than the Technodrome. I'm in my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle phase tonight. So all the networks were like Technodromes. And the external perimeter was all they had to worry about. Whether it was firewalls, routers, switches, nothing internal. It was just all about Firewalls, firewalls, and more firewalls.
Right?
That's it. Who had the best firewall? Who had
Exile?
the best rules in place?
So, where I'm going with this is that was the days when it was also the migration from the old mainframe dummy terminal where you literally only had one system to secure to now you have smart systems at the endpoint that connect in with central servers. So you have a transition to a new technology with an old mentality, which will actually help us transition from the past to the present in the topic. But taking that same, which is why then it went back to single source of protection, right? Where previously we had just to protect the mainframe and control access to the mainframe itself. And now that just expanded a little bit to controlling access to who could get inside to where these multitude of smart systems were instead of an individual mainframe.
Sure. And then today, the perimeter has all but disappeared for the most part. And we'll touch on a bit of where it's going in the future because we're at a point where, like, 5 years ago, the perimeter had all but disappeared. Now, even in internal, like, anything is starting to disappear. Using your owned devices is starting to disappear, but we'll get to that in a minute. But your perimeter has basically disappeared. Remote work, don't need VPN, online services, a bunch of stuff like that. Like we're losing the perimeter, and that brings with it like the onset of EDR technology and monitoring at the endpoint and all different kinds of stuff along that line. But interesting topic. I pass it off. Exile, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, when we're talking about perimeter, we're talking about internet service provider connections coming into a LAN in a traditional sense, where you have a standalone LAN that if it was cut off from the World Wide Web could still operate internally in and of itself. And the perimeter being those connections to systems outside that business local area network. Right?
Essentially the logical network map. Like this is what exists within my network. It's hardwired, right?
Yeah. And so the disappearing of the perimeter, what we're talking about here is as more and more things go to cloud services and being based off of individual devices, we don't have that existing singular business environment anymore, as it's now become a diaspora of technology spread across either a local geographic area or the world, depending on where data is hosted, right? Especially as more businesses, as they grow, they have to embrace more of a global economic structure of not just working in like a state or a country, but dealing with either transatlantic or trans-Pacific business traffic also.
Exactly. Charles?
Yes. So what today's network looks like, here's what you see when you walk into any network in general, data center in general. You see a bunch of managers having meetings. You see plenty of web apps, plenty of internal web apps that, again, of the past, you didn't really pay attention to because it wasn't on the perimeter. But you see plenty of web apps. You see plenty of wireless. You see plenty of voice over IP internally. You see developers. Some are working in the cloud, but some are still working on-prem at the moment in transition to the cloud, in transition to prepping for the future. This is what today's network looks like when you're looking at it now from a standpoint.
Oh, yeah. And you also see plenty of Slack and Google Drive and Dropbox and all these complete third-party services that exist. And that kind of leads us into the future a little bit, where almost nothing is internal. But more than that, at least in the time that we were at, in the last 5 years to now, really, things existed on the endpoint. We're even moving away from that. Like we're moving 100% away from the endpoint itself, and we're sticking everything in the cloud. And for anybody who's not aware, what is the cloud? It's somebody else's computer.
Server. Yep.
So like, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as you were describing, I had a thought that went back to mainframes. So we had mainframes, dummy terminals, physical location. Then we moved to broken systems with any similar physical location and the perimeter. And now we're going back to central remote locations with dummy systems that connect out to these systems.
Oh, yeah. But it's like 500 central dummy locations.
Exactly.
Right. Pretty much.
It's Slack plus Google plus Amazon plus Azure plus O365. It's 1,000 different services. And everything now today, and this is where I'm getting to my future observation, where I think detection is going to go in the future. very little today happens on the endpoint. Very little data today is stored on the endpoint. Very little data is stored on network shares. Data went from like consolidated network shares behind a perimeter to the endpoint. And now very little is even being stored on the endpoint. It's starting to go to these cloud services, which means basically everything is happening in the browser. So that brings up a really interesting concept because there's basically no visibility today in the browser. Right. It's just not something that exists. Modern EDR technology does not pick up on browser stuff. And we talked about this a few months back. There were thousands of malicious Chrome extensions that existed and lived for a while that millions of people downloaded. I think there were like 200 extensions downloaded by millions of people. There's almost no visibility in that. That's not something that has been considered in the stack because it's within that own little sandbox. It's not picked up at the endpoint level. So like, I think the browser becomes a huge, huge vector as we go forward. And I think these cloud services like the AWSs and like throwing Docker and shit up in AWS become huge, huge vectors as we go forward. But like, that's my take on the future and where we're going and where detection is going to have to go. What does everybody else think?
Go ahead, Charles.
There we go. Had to unmute for a second. Yeah, I totally agree. The way like everything's at the browser, because even now, and I remember when I was working at this interesting tech company, and a developer said an interesting thing to me. He said, "Hey, that's great that you're finding all these attacks at the server level, but eventually we're moving back to the client because the computers are more powerful. We can run our code. We can do all our number crunching at the client level and then just use bits and pieces of the server technology. And then we're focusing more on serverless technology, which is within the cloud itself. For those of you who are not familiar with like serverless computing, it's pretty much the cloud computing platform that you're running does everything for you. It runs the server. It manages all the allocation of the resources as well too. So
what you're saying is instead of having like a single system where we think about like a bare bones system where you have a CPU, sometimes a GPU, your HDD, your RAM, all that stuff is separate and on demand per transaction or per load need.
Exactly. And then all the crunching, the hardcore crunching and everything else happens at the client level. So that's why you don't see a lot of visibility in the browser right now, as of yet. I mean, as time goes on and security gets a little bit better, detections technology come out, EDR solutions come out, we'll see more.
Oh, I'm sure. Because the other interesting thing that comes with this is this concept of trust to your vendor space, which like trust to your vendor space is not something that's built into my nature. Yeah. Like, yeah, Google will go remove malicious extensions from the store, but it's not going to keep somebody from doing it. How fast are they going to do it? I don't have any visibility into what Google's removing, so on and so forth.
And like, how much do you actually trust Google to not do something with your data? Right.
We're putting a lot of general trust in the vendor technology now, and for most of these vendors, like we are the product. So like that becomes interesting too.
So there's no trust, right? Like you're going to be abused in order to...
I mean, they can only abuse you so much if they want to have a viable business model that actually makes money.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Exile, what do you got?
So I was thinking about this, and it's like, okay, so if we offered a counterpoint, what would it be to the browser being the place of the future? And so I'm going to say this, and it's going to end up supporting your statement. So if we look at the direction of mobile apps, right? Mobile devices, it's all these different like pictures that show up on a phone and our apps. Well, actually, a lot of those apps themselves are actually just a unique user interface for a web browser on the back end. So it's not like these people are developing, there's widespread development of unique apps. It's just that they're displaying a web browser or web-based content through a unique interface.
Absolutely.
So that still exists with what you're saying about the browser being the future. Even if it looks like a mobile app, it still is effectively a web browser displaying something from a remote web server or web application.
Well, that's the other half of it, right? The mobile side. Cell phones, tablets, things that traditionally have not gotten a lot of focus.
Yep.
Entire companies can work off of a damn iPad now.
Or Or a chip that you put inside a pig's brain with some wires.
Right?
Yeah.
Dun dun.
Dun dun. Baxter Stockman and the Mousers.
But that's pretty much. So, I mean, that is the detection's thoughts on where we are going, and we thought that would be a really cool way to start season 3. We're now going to kick into a brand new segment run by our very own BSD Bandit. I'm going to try to like go super sultry on my voice, and I'm going to fail horribly. But now it's time for the Red Team Corner.
Dun, 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 dun.
Name may still be changed.
TBD on the name.
Name pending.
But I am super hyped for this.
What do you got for us this week?
Well, tonight's Diaper Dandy is attacks on the Docker API. So
I'm also still stuck on Diaper Dandy. That's all I'm going to get out of this now.
Dandy. That's going to be the name of the episode, Diaper Dandy.
So anyway, with the Diaper Dandy Docker attack, apparently, so red teamers are focusing a lot on, like I said, with APIs, as we were talking about futuristic, like with APIs, and when we're looking for different things to attack, the first thing that we're going to do is hit up Shodan, right? And the first thing we're going to look at when we hit up Shodan is our Diaper Dandy, the Docker API, the registry API to be exact. So for those of you who are not familiar with Docker, and I'm just assuming, but Docker is just a containerized. It's a way to virtualize your application. So it's 1/4 of a VM. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not going to say what was said earlier about VMs, but
So real quick, what is just like 1-2 sentences? What is the benefit if someone's not familiar with container technology? What is the benefit of using something like Docker to contain?
The benefit is just using it. Like, say if you're developing an application, you can isolate that application that you're working on, and it could be in beta or whatever else. It's a way of just isolating an application that you're actually working on or developing on. So it gives you your own pretty much personal space without affecting production. Pretty much. That's the goal of Docker. So from an attacker's, red teamer's point of view, this is the first thing that we're looking for. So we're on the hunt with Shodan. We're looking for misconfigured Docker APIs at the registry level. And when I say registry, it's not the Windows registry.
We're not talking the hive mess that is Windows registry.
Right. I said the hive mess. But we're just talking about the Docker's implementation of the registry. So
what's stored in the registry really quick?
It could be anything. It could be customer data. It could be PII. It could be system configuration. It could be anything that could be within the registry itself. So when we're looking for this stuff and we're finding misconfigured Docker images, this is what we're looking for, and we're finding a crap ton of misconfigured Docker images out there. And from a red teamer's perspective, these are like jewels. There's been times where you can actually find passwords to Active Directory credentials within a Docker API because that particular password that was used to configure or create the container is also the same password that allows access to a user account that's on an internal network in the Active Directory environment.
And probably an admin too, since it's usually admins who are setting up these containers.
Pretty much. Which a lot of times they have access to DA, domain admin. That's like gold in the red team world.
That's the holy grail.
Yes. That makes you do the happy dance. So
you can't see it, but he is doing a dance.
In my mind, I'm doing the dance. But in general, these are things that like a lot of red teamers are looking for. These are things of interest. The APIs of the just Docker at this moment that we're talking about, but there's hundreds of APIs out there that a lot of red teamers are interested in. What we're talking about tonight is just only Docker. But again, you're querying the Shodan API, you're gathering all this information about the registry API point, And this is where you can find out a lot of diaper dandies and jewels and all the other goodies.
You got to share the analogy before we move on, though.
Now,
so we're going to share the analogy before I ask my question
out here to make it a little bit simpler. Okay. So again, I'm in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle mode tonight, right? So, all right, your network, your Docker images is the Technodrome. Remember I talked about the Technodrome earlier. Now, the Technodrome has these wonderful little foot soldiers, or Mousers, if we want to call it that. And the red team is Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael.
No,
they would never be on the red team.
No, this is the wrong direction.
Hey. Now, we're trying to gain access to the network being undetected by the Technodrome. But we're using APIs to do it in Docker. Now, the main goal is to gain access to, again, as what we talked about earlier, shout out to Elon Musk, we're gaining access to what the Docker has stored inside its registry, aka the Fitbit brain. Now that we've gathered that information, then we can use that to further do lateral movement within the network or elevate privileges within the network. So,
I mean, or steal your PII and move on.
Now, I want to back up a little bit here because you said something specific that I think is important for our listeners to hear about. So you said it was based off of a misconfiguration in the Docker API.
Yes.
What is that misconfiguration?
Well, by default, it's just using the default settings. Like right out of the box, Docker API for the registry is configured for no authentication right out of the box. So
I would just like to point out that that's not a misconfiguration. That's a lack of proper configuration.
That's intended by design.
Still, it's intended by design, but if you're an admin or a developer that's paid to configure a Docker container and make sure that it's secure, and I'm just going to say security engineer, if you don't do that, what do we call that? A misstep or a misconfiguration?
Yep.
I would just call that a lack of doing your job.
I was just going to say, like, in Docker's defense, they have it configured to make it easiest to develop and let the developers and engineers go back and secure it after they've confirmed the application or data flow is working correctly.
But I shouldn't be mean to the security engineers out there. This might be something that you didn't know.
Right.
And now you do. And knowledge is power.
Exactly. And this is why we're talking about it on detections.
Exactly. So speaking of
that,
detections.
Yes.
Let's pivot to the detection.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exile, what do you got?
So I was thinking about this as you were talking, and I dug into it a little bit more. And it also seems like this is similar to like misconfigured Amazon AWS S3 buckets, like these static object storage locations in cloud services where the base configuration doesn't necessarily have any sort of authentication itself configured. And by default, it's open access to the internet, hence why it's found by Shodan, Census.io, all these other databases that do internet scans to look for this kind of stuff. So my thought is, and Understudy, definitely jump in and see if you agree, disagree, but what if you configured that to work as, I think it's Docker's recommendation itself, if not a few other companies, that API access is only available from that secure LAN, that secure IP address space, and then detect on anything that's coming from non-private IP space.
Especially anything that's coming over any API base.
Yeah.
Absolutely one way. And then you also have kind of the back end of that of this has already happened. And you can absolutely start looking into things that are done. Because typically once somebody connects to a system like that, they're going to be running a specific set of things. They're going to be looking at bash history and things of that nature. So you always have the ability to pull into that. But I'm not going to go too deep down in that because we might delve into that more later.
Yep.
And we don't want to, burn too many detections too fast in season 3.
Now, the other thing that I think is a side benefit of this too is that also gives our vulnerability management people and our threat hunters some specific things to look at. So like from the vulnerability management standpoint, you can now audit any Docker APIs that are configured to be unauthenticated access or that are available or addressable from your non-business IP space.
And then your threat hunters, you can basically do a hunt and baseline, and we say baseline a lot around here, where you're baselining what should be talking to what, and then finding those patterns and saying, well, if anything but this set talks to this thing, we probably have an issue.
Right. And again, we're keeping it on level 1 of the Technodrome, so pretty much we're on level 1. We're not down at the lower level where Krang is right now.
Correct.
So
not yet.
Level 1. Yes.
Not yet. We'll get there.
So with that, I think that brings us to close, and we're almost within the time frame that we're trying for. First off, BSD, you're going to take us out tonight. You're going to give everybody the wonderful go forth and find badness because this is your first one. But I'm so excited to see where season 3 goes. I'm so excited to add BSD to the cast. We hope everybody enjoyed. By all means, reach out to any of us. Give us feedback. We love feedback. Good, bad. What do you like? What you didn't like? We're all tough. We can take it even if we cry it like Care Bears.
Yep.
We can totally take feedback. On that note.
Yeah, I was just going to say one last thing. Even though BSDBandit Charles here has only just joined the show, it's felt like he's been a family member since the beginning.
Oh, God, yeah. 100%. And with that, BSD, take us out. Yip, yip.
Yip, yip. Well, once again, thank you for tuning in. And we've got so much exciting stuff in season 3. But I just want to leave you with this awesome jewel that someone told me many years ago. If it don't challenge you, it don't change you. So go forth, be great, and congratulate. Ow! Yip, yip!
And find badness.